Our next speaker is Francisco Marconi. Francisco Marconi is a computational journalist and the co-founder of information company Applied Excel, recognized by Fast Company's 2020 Innovation by Design Awards. Francisco was previously Research and Development Chief at the Wall Street Journal, leading a team of data scientists and computational journalists developing data tools for the newsroom. Prior to Wall Street Journal, he managed strategy at the Associated Press, where he co-led content automation and artificial intelligence efforts. Francisco was recognized by the Media Shift as one of the top 20 digital media innovators, named to the 25 under 35 Next Generation of Publishing Leaders by the Editor and Publisher magazine, and nominated as a DigiDay Future Leader Awards finalist. He is an affiliate researcher at MIT Media Lab and a Tau Fellow at Columbia University. His ideas have been featured in the New York Times, Politico, Forbes, Quartz, Adweek, DigiD, World Economic Forum, Columbia Journalism Review, Harvard Digital Initiative, Neiman Lab. Francisco's book, Newsmakers, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Journalism, was published by Columbia University Press in 2020. This is a must-read book for every journalist. Francisco shall talk about how AI is shaping the future of journalism. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you all. Welcome, everyone. Good evening in India. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just take a moment to share my screen. So today what I thought of doing is, rather than just talking in abstract about AI in journalism, actually show you different case studies in different examples of how artificial intelligence is already being implemented in newsrooms. As mentioned, I recently published a book on the subject of AI in journalism, in how it's impacting all value points of the news business. And so if you think about the process that you go through as a journalist to collect information, to analyze that information, then to make available at scale to your readers, we now see that AI is directly impacting all of these different processes, from news gathering, where algorithms are used to mine data from sensors, to the production of the story. So the smart tools that can take this data that was collected through the news gathering process and automatically format it into text or video or audio. And then finally, distribution, where there are many systems in different newsrooms utilizing AI to optimize the distribution and to get reach and engagement from its readers. So the way that this brief presentation is organized is that we'll be touching on examples in micro case studies for each one of these steps of the news process. And then at the end, if we have a little bit of time for questions, we'll open for questions. So I'll start with the first step, where AI is already providing value to journalists, and more specifically in news gathering. And I'll start with a very interesting example from the news agency Reuters, where the company is using event detection in social media to identify emerging topics and trends that may be newsworthy. And so there's a fascinating example of how this technology was used back in 2015, where the news agency was able to capture and to identify a shooting in California before any other news organization, because social media users were posting and tweeting topics related to shooting, related to the specific location. And so the way that this algorithm worked was that it identified something that was anomalous, and therefore then flagged it. So the important thing here to keep in mind as we are showing these different examples is that AI is not replacing the role of the journalists. AI is just another tool to make their work more effective. And at the end of the day, the decision maker is the human that is controlling these systems. As Professor Charlie Beckett mentioned, it's important to apply editorial standards to all of these algorithms that are applied in the newsroom. And so this is an example of how monitoring external data sources like social media in real time can lead to journalistic insights. I'll look at or I'll show another very important example in this approach, which is looking at text mining, specifically leveraging natural language processing, which is a subdomain of AI. This is, in my opinion, one of the biggest areas for opportunity and innovation, where by leveraging some of these techniques, as a journalist, you are able to go through millions and millions of documents and make relationships between entities in those documents. So, people, places, dates, organizations, and so on. In the International Consortium on Investigative Journalists used this approach in the Paradise Papers, which was a shared investigation into financial and white collar crime. And this approach was utilized to analyze 13.4 million documents that otherwise would have just been humanly impossible to do. So AI in the context of news gathering can really scale how journalists conduct analysis, and how quickly they are able to derive meaning and insight from the analysis that they are doing. Another example, so I talked about event detection, now analyzing texts, which I want to briefly pause on, because I really think this specific domain of natural language processing is one of the most relevant technologies or approaches for journalists. So in simple terms, natural language processing is the field of AI that allows journalists to make sense of vast number of documents in text, and expedite the process that I just described briefly. And so what that looks in practice is that this technology is able to scan documents and then either find patterns, find relationships, find items or notes that are somehow related, and then it's up to the journalist to make to derive meaning from that information. But there are other ways of where AI, more specifically machine learning, are also being used, also in investigations. This brief case study that I show here is for BuzzFeed News, that in 2007 published a story on spy planes in the United States. And so the way that they identify the spy planes is that they have patterns of flight routes. And as you can imagine, there are thousands of planes flying around us. But the surveillance and these surveillance aircrafts actually have very specific patterns. And so if you can imagine, they will fly over an area and then stay there just to investigate and to surveil what's happening. During this process, journalists at BuzzFeed identified, or I should say, the machine learning models flagged a certain number of planes that were indeed skydiving planes. And so incorrectly pointing out to to aircraft that was not the spy planes that the investigation was focusing on. And the reason for that happening is that the planes used in skydiving are actually very similar, have very similar patterns to those used for spying and surveillance, because they fly over an area and then they just stay there for a while until the person jumps in skydives. And so in this case, it's the machine providing a false positive, and it's the responsibility of the journalist to correct it. And so in this case, journalists at BuzzFeed News identified that and were able to correct. And so this is the prime example of having editorial insight over an algorithmic result. A few things that I want to highlight here is that although algorithms are machines, they are actually developed by humans, and humans make mistakes. So those biases that you find in humans, you'll find them in algorithms. And so I developed essentially a checklist of questions to ask when implementing an algorithm, and I'll share this presentation later on. But basically looking at issues related to the types of algorithms that you as a journalist are using, to issues around transparency. Human override is very important. So making sure that there's always a human in the loop, and that a journalist can intervene in the algorithmic process, like the example that I just mentioned right before this, where a journalist identified that there was an error and then able to quickly correct it. And then a few other very important things related to the explainability. So being able to show how an algorithm arrived to a certain decision, what data it used, and so these are, in a way, the new types of editorial questions beyond the traditional ones that we should be asking regardless. These are the questions that we should be thinking about when dealing with algorithms in journalism. So I gave you a few examples of how AI is changing the news gathering process, so the process of collecting information for reporting on it. And now I would like to tell you a little bit more about how it's used in news production. So once you have the information, how can AI help you enhance that information or format that information in new ways? I'll start with an example that is considered the best practice in the industry, which is around news automation. So being able to turn data directly into text. The example you see here on the right is a fully automated story by the Associated Press. In this example is around university or college sports, where if the journalist has access to a data set, they can leverage a subdomain of AI called natural language generation that lets you turn that data into a story that reads exactly like a human would have written. One thing that I want to mention here is the impact that this type of approach can have. So for the Associated Press as a news agency, and for other news organizations that need diversity of content and scale, the Associated Press was able to go from covering 300 companies, and this is the example of the impact on the business desk, from covering 300 companies during earnings season to covering over 4,400 companies with the help of smart machines. And so, as I mentioned here, the goal is not to automate the function of a journalist, is actually to free them up so that they can focus on higher impact journalism. And so these stories that are currently being that you are able to generate with AI work extremely well if there's if they are more structured and formulaic in nature, and in a way stories that have a repetitive approach. So think about, you know, sports where you need to give a recap of the players, or how many goals someone scored, or even economic and financial stories that follow specific data points. So I want to take a moment here to explain at the high level how our news automation works. So once a journalist gets access to a validated data set, so, you know, it could be sports, it could be elections results, which is very relevant right now. It could be financial data. The journalist, and specifically the automation editor, which is a new role that many newsrooms have now, at least in the United States. They make sure that that data is in the right format, that is in a structured approach, and then it's up to the automation editor to develop different templates to show the machine how to write. And so this type of template writing, if you ever play the game Mad Libs, it's very similar, where, you know, there are blank spaces for the data. But the difference here is that these templates are smart. So this type of writing is called branch writing. So you need to think about every single possible variation of what's going to happen once the data comes in. So let's say you're waiting for the financial results of a company. You have to write the story from the perspective of the company posting very positive results, or posting expected results, or posting very, very negative results. And so it's difficult for journalists to estimate or to predict, I should say, what's going to happen next. And so as part of the automation process, you need to think about all possible futures. And then there are different types of software that you take this template and you're able to automatically feed in the data and produce thousands of stories at scale. One thing that I want to caution here is that there are new techniques in natural language that enable creation of fake text at scale with little human intervention. So the example of automation that I just showed you here, there's a lot of control by the journalist and by the editor and by the newsroom, because they're actually developing these templates. But new forms of natural language that use deep learning and machine learning techniques allow to create fake text. So the little blurb that I have here on the right side about the book that I published is fake. It's generated by a machine. And so the only thing that I provided was this prompt. Newsmakers is a book about journalism and artificial intelligence. And then the machine writes the following sentences. The book is an introduction to the growing role of artificial intelligence in shaping the news. It was originally published by, and so on. And so if you read these content, it kind of looks like it could be accurate, but you see basically, that this is actually very dangerous for for fake news and for misinformation. So the reality is that as technology evolves, there are positive and impactful use cases of AI in any industry, to be honest, but there's also negative consequences. So there needs to be a lot of responsibility, and in my view, journalists have the responsibility to hold algorithms accountable, because this editorial lens, this critical way of looking at the world, is the first line of defense when evaluating this type of information. Still on the topic of production, how AI is helping with production. A few other examples where video facial recognition in video automation is being used to automate the process of labeling video, which is a very time-consuming process. And so if you are in video production, it can be pretty time-consuming to tag everyone that appears in the video and generate subtitles and all of these related production tasks that producers have to do. And so this is an example of how Sky News used AI in facial recognition to identify guests at the UK royal wedding a few years ago. A few other warnings here is that these algorithms can make mistakes. So like in any other area of AI, there are always biases. This is a fascinating evaluation of computer vision technologies. This research is developed by MIT Media Lab, where researchers and academics looked at the performance of these algorithms when classifying male, female, people with lighter skin color, people with a darker skin color. And what this research found is that the algorithms showed an error rate of 35% for darker skin women when compared to just 1% rate to lighter skin men. And so in this case, the algorithm is produced biased results. So in a way, the algorithm can be considered sexist, it can be considered racist. But the reality here is that this is about how the algorithms were trained. So the data input utilized to optimize these algorithms, the reality is probably, if it's producing these types of errors, is because there was not enough diversity in the data used to train the algorithms. And so as a response, some of these companies are proactively developing data sets of faces that are diverse from different skin colors, genders, and so on, with the hope of improving the quality of the results. So as you are thinking about AI in the newsroom, it's very important to keep in mind that all of these systems can make mistakes. Therefore, it's crucial for the editor to be involved in the process. A few other cases, this is a fascinating one used by the BBC, where there's synthetic, it's the broad area of synthetic video, where artificial intelligence software is being developed by Synthesia, which is a company in the UK. What happens is that essentially this person here functions almost like as the puppet master that controls the face of the newscaster. And the reason that this was done, and it was an experiment, was so the newscaster could speak languages that they didn't speak. So they would have you know, a person in the background controlling the facial expressions of the newscaster and then speak different languages. And the goal here was to provide wider access to news to people that speak you know, different languages and might not speak English in the case of the BBC. This other example is similar. The difference here is that what you are seeing here is um, fully automated. So these news anchors are fully digital. This is developed by the Chinese news agency Xinhua, and the approach here is, or the goal here is similar to the one that I just explained before, where the hope is to create a more personalized experience where you can change the the dialect or the accent that the person uses. You can change the you know, the backgrounds, the newscaster that you want to deliver the news to you. And so the hope is that this personalized experience can drive more engagement to news. But as I mentioned, with any other of these systems. Unfortunately, I had a brief video animation. Not sure if this is working here, but I'll provide this presentation. But there's the emergence of deep fakes, which are essentially fake videos that are generated through AI with the goal of tricking or deceiving the audience into thinking that they are real. So the example that I have here, and unfortunately it's not working. You have a source actor, very similar to the approach that I mentioned with the BBC, that is controlling the facial movements of a target actor. So in this example here, this is it's a video of former US President George Bush, and you have a researcher here demonstrating how when it moves his face, he can actually control the movements of a new video, which is a fake video. And so this is very dangerous as it relates to misinformation in specifically public figures, including politicians and business executives, can since there's a lot of video and content available out there, can be the target for this type of deep fake or fake news. So we talked a little bit about how AI is being used in collection of information and data. We just talked a little bit about how we can expedite the process of production, either through text or through video. There are other examples that I didn't mention today around audio, so turning text into audio and text into video and so on. But now I want to talk a little bit about how AI is changing the last step of the news process, which is the last step of distribution. So once you have the news article or the video or the story ready, what do you do with it, and how do you leverage AI to drive impact and audience engagement? So I collected a few examples. The one that I want to talk to you about first is a personalized news experience by the Times, where the newspaper developed a system that, or as they call it, a digital butler that uses data from the reader, so behavioral data, interests, preferences, to personalize the experience and to deliver the content that as a reader you are looking for. So this is very important because a lot of news organizations are implementing these algorithms, either recommendation or personalization algorithms. The problem here is that too much personalization, both in the websites of the publisher as well as in social media platforms, leads to what we call information bubbles. And this means that the way that these algorithms work is that they show you more of the information, the content, the point of view that you are interested in, and in that sense, they are confirming your view of the world, of your bias. So, for example, if you are someone who is reading a lot of liberal leaning sources, over time these systems will overemphasize showing you that type of information, and this is true specifically in social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and others. And at the same time, if you are relying on more conservative leaning news organizations, over time you'll only see that type of information. And so what happens is that two people that have different views of the world and different consumption patterns will eventually form their own. They will retract to their information bubbles, to their to the information cocoons, and um, will have a very specific view of the world, and in this sense becomes it's a problem for online polarization, and which translates into just societal polarization. So this is a very important risk and a warning to be aware of, that these algorithms can accelerate or propagate information bubbles. But there's also very good examples of these systems being used in very, very positive ways. The example we have here is the New York Times using a system, a machine learning system called Perspective, to moderate comments. And so, as you can imagine, an organization like the New York Times gets millions of comments per day. How can we leverage AI to accelerate that process of vetting and approving comments? And so editors and content moderators at the New York Times use this technology to identify potentially harmful content or online harassing. And this is based on a toxicity, what's called a toxicity score, where if there's a high toxicity score, that comment is flagged, and then the editor can make a decision on whether to report it or to do something with it. The way that these systems for moderation are trained is that, as in any other AI system, they take large quantities of comments from online, from different forums, from newspapers, and then they build models based on catching harmful content based on that initial corpus of data. So if there's no editorial oversight on these types of algorithms to control, language and hate speech and online harassment, in some cases, the AI can be biased. And so this is a research paper by a group of academics that looked at how these types of APIs dealt with different language and expressions used by different profiles of people. And they found that in some cases, these AI systems flag content as being toxic when they were not. And so again, the process here is that the editor should always be in the loop and evaluate errors that may be derived from machine learning. But there's also, I just touched on biases, on the AI creating biases. The AI can also be used to prevent biases. So the Financial Times actually developed this system that called She Said, He Said, and tracks whether a quoted source is male or female. And the goal here is to alert journalists to have more representation in the stories. As you know, there are many different studies that have shown that that sometimes reporting is biased, and it overemphasizes for male sources. And so this is an example of how a news organization took a proactive stance in addressing gender bias in reporting. And then I'll finish here on a few last examples, and then maybe we have a few minutes for questions. The Wall Street Journal is using AI, specifically machine learning, to optimize the paywall experience. So this is also related to the distribution, to the last step. The way it works is that this AI-powered paywall measures reader activity and knows when to surface a discount or a promotion, or even show you the paywall based on all of these different attributes in behaviors. So as we've seen today, AI is changing the news industry. It's changing how journalists think. One thing that I want to highlight here is that as these news applications are built, it's very easy to fall. It's really easy to just think about implementing these things just for experimentation's sake, and that's actually that's not very resource effective. These technologies should be implemented to address a challenge or a problem that the newsroom faces, and they should be looked at as a tool to find possible solutions and to improve the quality and the output of the journalism. In these examples, or I've showed you case studies that are pretty sophisticated. The reality is that the best way to get to reliable results is to focus on incremental development. So testing things in an iterative way and then rolling them out progressively. So this example here is from the Wall Street Journal, where the newspaper started this internal tool for news for journalists to be able to search through 30 years of speeches and interviews by the presidential candidates in the United States, and used machine learning and in different techniques to be able to quickly surface and sort out different points of views on different topics. And so this started as an internal tool for journalists, for fact-checking, for research, and then eventually actually evolved into a reader-facing tool. And so this is a prime example of this incremental approach, where by doing this internally first, journalists had the chance to validate the process, to identify potential errors before publishing it as a feature on the website. So always be thinking about these three elements. As journalists think about implementing AI in the newsroom, it's very important to have a product development mentality. So thinking about whether an approach is viable. So can you actually make it work? Is it feasible? Does the newsroom or the journalist have the technological resources to do it? Or does it have to partner with someone like a university? And then lastly, and most importantly, is it desirable? Does the news audience desire the things that you're developing? A lot of people ask about whether AI is going to put journalists out of a job. The answer is, in like any other industry, jobs will evolve. And what I foresee is that actually journalists will start using these tools the same way that they use any other tools like email or a word processor and any of those things that are common practice today. But there's also a number of new roles entering the newsroom. So automation editors that are responsible for creating the automation processes inside the newsroom, computational journalists that use data science approaches for investigative journalism, and many other roles like newsroom tool manager, AI ethics editor, and so on. I'll leave you with sort of these four takeaways. So technology is changing. Today's AI that is a lot. There's a lot of development in technological breakthroughs in this space. But 5 years from now, it might be something else. What doesn't change are the journalistic standards. AI can make the same mistakes as humans. So again, human in the loop is crucial. And the best way to leverage AI is to actually experiment with it. And there are many open source tools that journalists are using. I often share many of those tools that are open source on my social media. And then finally, journalists have this important role of bringing ethical considerations to the use of AI. In this editorial lens is crucial for the future of the technology as well as the future of the news industry itself. So I'll stop here. I think we have maybe a minute or so for questions. So maybe I can take one question, and then I'll be available via email if you want to contact me.
Okay, thank you, Francisco. See, our participants have given us a lot of questions to ask for you. And it was a wonderful session. My colleague, Tara CB, shall moderate the question and answer session.
Good morning, sir. This is Tara Ravishankar. I am going to moderate the session. I'll move on to the question. Data journalism is true and believe in the stringent accuracy of data mining. But how far the AI can handle with the authenticity and accuracy people believe in numbers and data?
Yeah, so I think this is, this is related to the point that I was making, that editors need to be in the loop and humans need to be in the loop to validate these algorithms and to make sure that they are not producing bad results. But also at the same time, one thing that this question brings up is that you get closer. AI is allowing you to get much closer to what we call ground truth, where suddenly you're able to quantify all the things around you. So it could be looking at political speeches and seeing patterns in speech. It could be using data from sensors, and so in that regard, data journalism and computational journalism are providing much more analytical views of the world. But again, it's always a balancing point, because that data that is collected can also be biased. And journalists will have a crucial role in the development of the AI industry. The ethics and the standards and the principles that are found in use should be applied to technology.
Thank you, sir. Do you have a little more time to spare for next question, or shall we wind up now?
Unfortunately, I don't, but I'll be available via email, and I'll provide my information. It was a pleasure to speaking to all of you, and thank you for the invitation and for the great initiative.
Anyway, thank you, sir. It's a very wonderful session, Francisco. And now Chodi, Manju ma'am will talk to you.
Thank you, Francisco, for joining us. It was really inspiring to know how AI is set to transform journalism. Thank you for accepting our invitation to join this summit, taking time from your hectic schedules. It is refreshing to know that artificial intelligence is not here to replace journalists or eliminate jobs. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Feature interviews, analysis, data-driven journalism, and investigative journalism. AI is surely here to bring back quality in journalism. As journalists, we need to be ready to upskill and integrate AI tools to our workflow. Dear participants, we are concluding today's session. On behalf of the speakers, we thank all of you for joining us. The feedback form link is shared in the chat box. We will be providing participation certificates to all who submit feedback form. We will be connecting back next Thursday on 12th November at 6 p.m. India time. We will be sharing the participation link with you, and stay tuned. We have another 3 great speakers joining on the day 2 of the summit, 12th November, Dr. Mohammed Abdul Zahir, CEO of Artificial Intelligence Journalism for Research and Forecasting, UAE, Dr. Nicholas Diakopoulos from Northwestern University, United States, and Dr. Shiva Kintali, CEO of TrueDat Inc., United States. Till then, stay safe. Good night from Team Christnagar, Maranellore, Trivandrum.